And we are back. Welcome back, folks. This is another episode of False Flag Nation, where we delve into conspiracy theories, hidden history, and the New World Order's agenda, bringing it to light.
That's what we do here.
Today we're going to be talking about the epidemic of mass shootings that has plagued the United States for the last 15 years, as well as before that, but this really took the center stage beginning with Columbine back in
1998?
1999, that was, and most recently with the shooting in Rosenburg, Oregon, at the Umpqua, I don't know how to say that, community college, but there's a lot of these things that are suspicious. It's possible there's more going on than is being reported. And we're just going to dissect stories like this and see if we can find out what's going on. Mr. Revere, start us off here. Bring us up to speed. For people who don't know, maybe they've been living under a rock, what happened in Oregon exactly?
Okay, so what we do know is, and we had to wait a couple days because there was a normal bullshit surrounding with false information and whatnot, but the facts have come to light a couple days later. We have the shooter, Chris Harper. He's 26 years old and a student at Umpqua Community College, Rosenburg, Oregon. He entered the school and began shooting and supposedly was targeting Christians. That's what a couple of the news reports are saying.
Really?
Asking people what their religious views were and whatnot. I think we're going to find out more about that specifically later, but there are definitely some reports of that. Was that the purpose of his shooting? I don't know. There's no motive that anybody's talking about now, except that he was involved. His father was from England, and his father may have been involved in something to do with the Irish Republican Army,
the IRA,
yeah,
Northern Ireland.
Yeah, so he had some sort of quotes on his MySpace page, which who uses MySpace anymore?
Yeah, there's the first sign.
Yeah.
There, Jesus.
Who uses MySpace anymore? But I guess people were scouring his page and they found a blog and there was some fucked up shit in there, talking about suicide and shooting and whatnot. But
yeah. Can you speak up a little bit?
Yeah. Long story short, he entered the school and he killed 9 people. So total, there was 10 people dead, including himself. I believe there was 13 others injured. And he was eventually, I guess it's coming out that he had a shoot-off with the police, but he actually killed himself. He was not killed by the police. So
he was cornered and
something like that. Yeah.
Okay.
It might have, who knows? Maybe this was just one big suicide by cop thing, and I don't know.
It's possible.
Yeah.
But what was your first gut level reaction when you saw this? Because these kind of things, unfortunately, are happening like every couple months now, and
right.
some of them, it's very clear that there was like mental illness was the culprit. The guy was just clearly crazy. Like we mentioned Columbine earlier. I think those two guys were just unstable. The guy at Virginia Tech, that clearly was just a lone lunatic with the videos he posted on YouTube and everything. All the signs point to that. There's just there's too much evidence. But a lot of these, it's just the shooter is just this non-entity that no one's ever heard of.
Exactly.
No one had any reason to suspect that he might snap, and then just suddenly, boom, just everything goes away, and then usually the shooter's taken out.
Like Adam Lanza in the Sandy Hook shootings.
Yeah, that's a good example of that. And there's, I think the shooting at the Sikh temple in I think that was Minnesota in 2008. Right. Some of these are a bit more suspicious. Some of these seem like they could be false flags organized for whatever reason.
social conditioning or something.
Sure,
like that.
yeah. But like when you saw this one a couple days ago in the news, what was your first reaction?
I guess it was probably like anybody else's normal. It was, oh shit, here we go again. And, this is just a terrible event. There's no way around it. We dive into the conspiracy aspects of a lot of this stuff, but you have to step back too and realize that there's 10 people dead.
Yeah.
And a lot of people injured. So
for sure. Yeah.
In any event.
Obviously we don't mean to make light of that or anything like that. We're just trying to see if there's more going on than is being reported. And I personally believe that at least with some of these instances, there's strong evidence suggesting there is.
Yeah, that's certainly the case, and it usually comes out later.
Yeah.
Like right now, there's really not that much information. There's, they just released his name 2 days ago.
Well, what do we know about the guy?
26 years old. His father, Chris Harper Mercer.
That's his name?
His name, yeah. And like I said, there was MySpace information on him.
Okay.
And his father came out and gave a talk to the press, a short talk, saying that, he couldn't believe that this happened. There was also a police meeting that they had with reporters and whatnot, and they said that he had 13 weapons back at his house, and that he had 7 weapons on the scene of the crime. So
yeah, there
was a lot of weapons involved. Interestingly enough, they were all purchased legally. So there's not going to be any of that nonsense with illegal weapons and whatnot.
Sure.
But in any event, he just... Look, I think what's going to happen is we're going to find out more about his past. We also know that he was kicked out of the Army in 2008. That's according to CNN. There's not too much more information, whether it was a dishonorable discharge or if it was a medical issue.
Psychological discharge.
Yeah,
something
like that. But he was kicked out in 2008. And so he does have some military background, which is interesting.
Sure.
What else do we know about him? Not much. He was kind of a loner, and he graduated from a special needs high school, and he was transferred a couple times.
So what, was he like Asperger's or something like that? Like that?
What I'm guessing is, and what happens in a lot of cases, is that the kids begin acting up in public schools.
Yeah.
And then there's meetings with the parents, and they get shifted around.
Yeah. And
they go to different schools or different programs.
Well, even someone who doesn't have a mental illness, that'll kind of, but that'll cause complications with them. It's like constantly having to make new friends and everything. But we were talking about Asperger's just now. It seems like that's kind of a common thread with some of these shooters, like the Adam Lanza at Sandy Hook.
Right.
The guy at Virginia Tech, I believe, also had Asperger's. And again, that goes back into these guys were kind of loners and, kind of people that, no one, they didn't have any friends, but maybe no one had anything bad to say about them either. They were just kind of on the peripheries there. But there's already been a few stories circulating that this is another false flag attack. These people are somehow like I don't know if you want to say sleeper cells, or they're agents used as part of a plot to destroy the Second Amendment.
Right.
And just generate so much disgust against violence caused by guns that people will
turn them
voluntarily.
over.
It's to gradually shift public opinion. But the thing is, like, the opposite seems to be happening. It seems like every time this happens, the NRA, the gun lobby, redoubles its efforts, and the people who believe in, are passionate supporters of private gun ownership, they just double down. They won't give an inch when something like this happens. If you look at the polls, there's a CNN poll showing that since Obama took office, there's been, I think, 9 of these shootings,
something like that,
which is insane.
Right.
And you think about it, like, that's ridiculous. That's more years than he's been in office. So that's like at least one per year. Like big, and those are big ones.
Mm-hmm.
With more than I think it was more than 4 or 5 casualties. But like the opinion that the question was, is protecting the Second Amendment more important than gun control laws? And more people are supporting protecting the Second Amendment, and that it's like 68% for versus against.
So maybe their plan is backfiring.
It seems that way. It's like a lot of people are beginning to think that, you know, these are being staged, and
I think there's a lot of truth to that. You know,
to what end though? Why do you think they're doing it?
Like you said, I think there could be some MKULTRA type projects going on
with the shooters,
right? With Adam Lanza, this guy Chris Mercer. You know, who knows? It could have been the Virginia Tech guy too, but I guess the angle would be that these, like you said before, these kind of loner kids are drawn into these or contacted somehow by Illuminati forces, and they're mind fucked literally, and given pumped prescription drugs, and basically set off there out. And, you know, they know it's a ticking time bomb. Yeah. Something is going to happen, and they might kind of supply him with the things that are needed.
Yeah.
And then once something happens, they turn around and cry that the Second Amendment needs to be abolished. And
absolutely, yeah. And that's the interesting thing you just mentioned, full of medications. Like almost every one of these guys, like to a man, is on some kind of psychiatric medication, and which brings up the mental health issue. The U.S. has the highest rates of mental illness in the world. Right. That's across all different types, not necessarily ones that would make you violent, but you know, the argument goes that combined with the relatively easy access to weapons compared to most other countries,
right,
is what causes this. I think that that's a legitimate argument. There's definitely
some truth to that.
This is a symptom of a mental health issue more so than a gun issue, and but the other side of it is why is this happening with such frequency? Why is it a media frenzy every time it does happen? I was talking with a friend of mine a couple days ago who's older than us. He's in his 50s, and we were talking about this, and like why does the news explode with this stuff every few months? And he thinks that there's not necessarily a greater amount of violence in the U.S. right now than there was, say, 30, 40 years ago. He thinks these kind of things happened, but just that it didn't become a national story. It was just like, if somebody in Texas shoots up a grocery store, it was a story in Texas, or like that part of Texas, and then, maybe you'd hear about it a little bit in other Southwest news stations, but it didn't become this national thing. But today, getting back to Columbine, that's the first one I can remember. It does become a national story, and I think there were ones in the 80s earlier, like that one with some kid climbed up a clock tower on a college campus with a sniper.
I think that was. I think that was actually the late 60s.
Yeah. So I think it had to be particularly bad for it to become a national story,
and that was different too, because he literally had a sniper rifle. It was so different. A lot of these other shootings are just a guy with a pistol or an assault rifle. That was like targeted. There's a different type of.
He was going after specific people.
I think he was going after random people, but it was just it is something personal about shooting someone with a sniper rifle, I would imagine. And
sure,
it's just different than kind of chaos and
now
spray and pray.
I mean, he was probably taking LSD or something. Speaking of which,
right,
that kind of goes into the MKUltra experimentation thing you brought up, because during the 60s, the Harvard carried out their LSD studies. Do you know about this?
Yep.
And one of the people they were dosing was Ted Kaczynski, who years later became the Unabomber.
What a coincidence!
Yeah, really. And a lot of these people ended up really fucked up and doing weird things later in life. I think like Timothy Leary was another one, but he didn't turn violent. Ted Kaczynski was one that just they just kind of turned him loose afterwards. They figured he was harmless, and then he he was concerned about like machines taking over the world, so he started mailing bombs to scientists that he thought would develop thinking machines, which
Terminator,
exactly. That's what he was concerned about. Yeah, which looking back might not be as crazy a fear as we thought. We remember we did an episode on transhumanism.
That and just the drones. Look at the fucking drones,
and the scientists, these Silicon Valley types. Who are actively seeking to build intelligent machines which can surpass human intelligence, and that's the singularity that there's kind of a cult of in Silicon Valley. And once it evolves beyond what humans can predict, who knows what the machines would do. They might identify, if you assign a machine to solve climate change, it will conclude that humans are causing climate change. So the most logical thing to do is kill humans to solve the problem.
Exactly.
So that's why he started mailing bombs. But
but it's funny though, because there was a perfect example of the U.S. government and using these fucked up LSD experiments and really just ruining someone's life, and then 15, 20 years later, whatever it was, he turns around and bang.
Yeah.
And
so it's not
so who's to blame for that?
Well, I think the blame, he's responsible for his actions, but the Harvard and the government needs to accept some responsibility for that. And that's getting back to the main topic here, it does show that this is not outside the realm of possibility. Like the U.S. government has attempted to stage false flag attacks, and we know that they have experimented on people without their consent.
Right. So it's not outlandish to think
that they would combine those two things,
right,
and to achieve various political ends. Like I know there was a huge opposition to the U.S. signing the UN Small Arms Treaty.
Okay.
Which I don't know all the details of, but the general gist of it is it's like severely restricting accessibility to firearms, with the idea that this will reduce violence and war and everything. But obviously that's infraction of the Second Amendment. So there was a lot of outcry about this in the U.S. So the U.S. never signed that. But the theory goes that these things are being orchestrated by the government, at least some of them, to manufacture consent, as it were, for increasingly stringent gun control. It would probably start with a ban on automatic rifles, which they've already done, but expired.
Check.
Yeah.
Well, it'll also go to a state level, too, like we saw in Connecticut after the Sandy Hook shooting.
Yeah.
With it, that was pushed through with little to no public knowledge, and then all of a sudden, 2 months later, Connecticut residents had to declare their semi-automatic assault rifles.
Yeah.
So, that could happen. If it could happen in Connecticut, it can happen in California.
So you think it would be like state by state, sort of like how the 21 years of age drinking law. That's state by state. There's no federal law. So
I think it'll creep.
Yeah,
state by
it'll
state.
Be slowly creeping. Start with the blue states, then work inward. I see. That's a good possibility. That, and I lost my thread there, but I know what I was going to say. But about the theory that these are being orchestrated by the government, I was always kind of on the fence about this, and I didn't fully buy it, because I was thinking, like, if this is what's going on, they've done this over and over and over again, and it hasn't worked. It hasn't. There's the lone psycho shooter who goes on a spree, and then the issue becomes politicized. They try to pass more gun control laws. It fails, and then people forget, and then there's another one. Just rinse, repeat. So I was thinking, if this is what they're trying to do, is to shock and outrage people so much, wouldn't it make more sense to create a bigger incident? Like you have multiple people going on these sprees and
at the same time,
killing dozens and dozens and dozens of people. But then I think the real reason that's never happened is because if these are in fact being staged, it's a hell of a lot harder to keep something like that under wraps the more people that are involved. Because if there's multiple shooters, chances are at least one of them will survive, and then he could talk, theoretically.
That's true, because that's a common theme in a bunch of these shootings too. The shooter is always dead.
Yeah, the shooter never makes it out alive. Now, obviously, if you take the story at face value, it's not surprising that that's going to happen. The cops are probably going to kill someone who's been doing that. Who's shooting up a public place. But yeah, in almost every one, the shooter never makes it out alive. You never learn much about him. You never...
It's true. And, there's the gun control aspect of this, too. But I also think that, we should touch upon the prescription drug aspect of it as well. Like we mentioned earlier in the beginning, the common theme in most of these mass shootings is some sort of high dose of prescription drugs, be it Prozac, Zoloft, Ritalin, something like that. And there's tons of lists online that you can find where they describe the event, they have the individual and what medications they were on. And we have the information from Columbine. Eric Harris, age 17, was on Zoloft and Lovux.
I think they both were.
Yeah, this says that the other shooter, Dylan Klebold, his medical records weren't released, but I'm not sure if that's completely accurate. But
can you talk into the microphone more?
Let's see here. Christopher Pittman, age 12, murdered both his grandparents while on Zoloft. Matthew Miller, age 13, hung himself in a bathroom closet after being on Zoloft for 6 days.
Jesus. So why is this stuff so widely available? It seems almost like the drugs are more dangerous than the guns. And obviously guns have always been around, but did these things happen like in the fucking 1800s or in the 1920s?
No.
Before any of these brain-altering drugs were available?
I don't think so. There weren't the level. The biggest shocker is if you look at the age range of these shooters, most of them are pretty young.
Yeah, they're all young males in their teens and 20s.
And most
of them anyway.
A lot of the prescriptions that are dealt to them are for ADHD, which you see in children, supposedly, which I don't believe exists. And also there's a lot of side effects for acne medicine, which is in
like Accutane.
Exactly.
That one. Yeah, so I actually took that for a couple weeks. I stopped taking it because it gave me headaches.
Yeah, you got acne medicine that lists suicide, depression, aggression, and violent behavior as a fucking side effect.
Yeah.
So you have that combined with puberty and
everything, all the shit that goes on in high school and everything. Yeah, it's not surprising. It's almost surprising this doesn't happen more often.
Right. But it kind of speaks to the bigger issue. You have and probably we're going to find out that this Chris Mercer guy, because I mentioned before, he was switched around in schools and he graduated from a special school for special needs kids. What probably happens, and what happens a lot of times in these cases, is that the kids start out with ADHD like symptoms, or they have other emotional problems.
Yeah.
And the psychiatrists who are on the payroll of the school district, they recommend that either the student be transferred or put on some sort of medication, be it Ritalin or something.
So this is, if I'm hearing you right, this is just, they're just doing this to make their job easier.
Exactly.
As opposed to...
It's a Band-Aid, and it's, okay, the kid's shuffling in his seat.
Yeah.
He's disrupting the class. Let's fucking medicate him.
Well, could it be the fact that maybe forcing kids to sit still in a room for 7.5, 8 hours a day isn't natural?
Right.
And it's weird, like you're pumping kids full of drugs because they don't act like machines. I mean, I guess by the time you enter the workforce after college, all spirit has been sufficiently beaten out of most people that they'll sit in their cubicles obediently. But at that age, they still put up a fight.
Right, and anybody that's seen as rejecting that kind of oppression, and that's what it is heavily, like they said, they contact the parents, and most parents don't want to fucking deal with it either. So they agree with it.
A lot of this is just shitty parents too.
And they say, all right, there's a pill that'll make my parenting job better, then done.
Yeah.
Sign me up. And they are just as guilty as the psychiatrists and the school staff and others involved. So, like I said, there's tons of lists online. You can see the age of the individuals and what prescription drugs they were on and what exactly happened. And there has to be a connection. There has to be a connection. There's no other way around it.
Yeah, I mean, these are all the common denominators in these situations. You have the young, isolated, probably sexually frustrated weirdo in the school. He's pumped full of drugs. He has parents that don't fucking pay attention to anything he's doing. And he always ends up dead, so you never really find out the whole story about him.
Mm-hmm.
It's just these incidents just all seem to follow the same script over and over again. I mean, so you have some of these outlier cases, but you know, like this, the guy in what is it, Denver? Not Denver, the suburb of Denver, who shot up the Aurora, Colorado.
Yeah.
That guy, he survived. That's an unusual one. I think they're doing an insanity plea, which they rejected, or something like that with him. But who knows? He might have been part of some kind of experiment.
I'm
like
sure
fucking
he was
with his mind for years to gradually get him to the point where he would do something like this.
He was on prescription drugs as well.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
So and he's in the initial interviews after the shooting. He was reported to say that the voices were telling him what to do.
Voices.
So, yes.
Voices transmitted by the Harper ray in Alaska.
Exactly. Or from Nibiru. Directly to him.
They are only a couple states away from Area 51. Which, by the way, did you hear about this? Area 51, they expanded it.
Really? Area 52?
No, there's some ongoing legal battle with this family that owns some, like a ranch nearby. And They kept trying to buy the land from them. They kept saying no. And they recently, I think they just made their final offer of like 1-point-something million to the family. Either that or we're just going to claim eminent domain and take it from you. So just,
wow.
And I need to check up on the outcome of that. But
so something big is happening.
Yeah, that was blowing up on InfoWars.
Wow.
But yeah, I think it's very clear that getting back to the politics with this, and we're almost out of time, but the president, Obama, is very much against the Second Amendment. He, I think if it was within his power to do so, he would just outlaw private ownership of guns outright and confiscate them. I think that's his ideal America right there, is a disarmed America.
I would agree with that too.
Yeah, he made some token gestures to the pro-gun crowd during his speech about the Rosenburg shooting, where he's saying that, you know, I respect the rights of people to want to hunt, or
That's
people,
such bullshit.
yeah, yeah,
That's like
or people who
conditioning
want to
right there,
defend
too.
their families, and that fundamentally misunderstands what the purpose of the Second Amendment is. Do you think the people who wrote the Constitution gave a fuck about hunting
Right.
to the point where they thought it was important enough to mention in the Constitution? You're writing the legal code for a country, and you're going to mention sport hunting in it? No, that's not what it's about.
Right.
It is the purpose of the Second Amendment at its core is to prevent the government from having a monopoly on the use of deadly force.
Right.
Because that's all government is at the end of the day, is force. I think that's a quote from George Washington. It's like, government isn't eloquence, it isn't reason, it's force. Everything else is just details.
Yeah, and there's more and more people that believe that too.
Yeah.
He makes comments like that. President Obama makes comments like that, and other people like who's that wretched creature from California?
Yeah, the congresswoman, the former House Speaker. I know who you're talking about.
Thing. Oh, and she was the one.
Nancy Pelosi. Yeah.
Oh, no, Nancy Pelosi and
who?
Wasserman Schultz or whatever her name is.
I have no idea who that is.
Debbie Wasserman.
Is she a senator or congresswoman?
I think she's a senator.
Okay.
But just absolutely ridiculous arguments against the Second Amendment. They live in a fucking fantasy world.
Well, they do. I mean, that is kind of the phenomenon as it unfolds, is that the people pushing these extreme measures against gun ownership live in these bubbles and like very coastal
Valley, right?
Urban areas where they live in these echo chambers of left-wing ideology where everyone thinks like them. They only associate with people like them. Yeah. And that probably happens on the right as well.
Yeah,
but
something tells me Texas is very similar to that.
Sure, yeah, exactly. So that's going on as well. But those people aren't trying to, they're not trying to take people in San Francisco's mocha frappa frappuccinos away from them either.
But those mocha frappuccinos aren't killing children.
Yeah. Well, I think we've seen what happens. History has shown what happens when governments disarm their population. So far in Europe, I think it's very difficult to get a gun in Europe, in most European countries. It's not totally illegal, but it's extremely difficult. But places that have outlawed gun ownership completely, at least in the Western world, and the governments went on to become increasingly oppressive, knowing that the people had no ability, they had no recourse, they couldn't resist them. So I think the first thing Mussolini did when he took power in Italy was to confiscate all private guns.
Right.
So what do you think we can expect in the next, let's use the end of Obama's term as a benchmark here. What can you expect in the next few years? Are we going to see more of these incidents? Are we going to see more one last aggressive push?
We're going to see more incidents like this, obviously, but there's, like you said, Obama's realizing what his legacy is going to be. He's going to be the president that didn't end the wars. He's going to be like he promised.
They're over, but they've just devolved
by name only.
A shit mess.
He didn't close Guantanamo Bay.
Yeah,
and
it's a big
he's
one.
Got, I believe, like you said, 11 or 12 big high casualty mass shootings in his presidency over his 2 terms. So what is he going to be remembered for? And he's going to push for tough legislation against the Second Amendment, and I think he's like I mentioned before, it's going to go state by state. There can't be this national crackdown. I don't think it's going to work like that. I think he's going to have his little pawns in all the states, and the Illuminati will work with the senators and congressmen.
Yeah,
it will be a trickle down effect.
Yeah, he has appointed, I think. He's appointed at least 2. I don't want to say 3 because I might be wrong, but he's appointed at least 2 Supreme Court justices. Who I mean, we all know who like Sonia Sotomayor and what's her Kagan.
Oh,
that
creature,
that butch from Boston. But we all know how the two of them are going to vote. But yeah, I'm anticipating there's going to be more of these incidents, unfortunately, and they're going to be sensationalized in the news, and it's, you know, and people will try to politicize them. And I think you're going to see one last aggressive push in Obama's final year in office to try and shut this down, like to do as much, to gain as much ground for the anti-firearm camp as possible during his last, 16 months in office. And
we'll have to see what happens.
If he's stupid, he'll overplay his hand, and that will just revitalize the opposition even more. But if he's more cunning, there will be this slow incremental progress you're talking about towards that end, where they just, you might see it state by state, or all sorts of like technicality rules, like expanding what constitutes a school district, so you can't own a gun there.
Right. This is going to be very tactful, little things like that. Like you mentioned, the school districts.
Yeah.
You can't own a firearm unless you have permission from your fucking ex-wife and her new husband.
Or
there's all sorts of creepy stuff like that in New York.
The mental health issue.
Right,
Are you serious? Like your ex-wife or something?
If you plan to be married within like 6 months or so, you have to have spouse permission. She has to sign a piece of paper agreeing to have the weapon in the house.
What the fuck? Wait, is that just to store it or to like own it?
So to get a permit.
What the fuck? Huh?
Right, and that's long term. New York's always been bad.
I know New York is a police state, but that's ridiculous. What?
Yeah.
It doesn't even make sense. Like your wife's in a bad mood or something, so she can stop her husband from owning a gun, or the other way around too.
I guess so.
What the fuck?
Yeah.
All right, but I mean, yeah, I mean that's what I think you should be on the lookout for, is more aggressive pushes in legislation, and you'll see more aggressive pushes back, both from the pro-gun lobby and from these real anti-establishment figures, like the guy down in Austin who made the 3D printed gun, the Liberator.
Right.
You'll see more people like him popping up, finding ways around it, and it's the more they push, the stronger the opposition becomes, and it's going to get worse before it gets better.
And
that's the only thing I can say with any surety here regarding this.
That, and we're going to obviously keep on this new case with Chris Harper, but I'm guaranteeing that it comes out that he was on some sort of psychotropic medication that was prescribed to him by some sort of psychiatrist that had a connection to either the state of Oregon or some school
CIA.
that he was attending.
CIA.
Yeah, exactly. It's all going to get traced back to that, but that's something to keep your eyes out for in the next couple weeks, and we'll see what happens then. So I think we're about done with this.
Yeah, we are just about out of time, folks. Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to like us on Facebook, on our official fan page, and check out more episodes at falseflagnation.com. We've got more stuff coming up for you soon. We're going to be looking into ISIS, Russia's recent incursion into Syria, and the U.S. hemming and hawing about it on the sidelines, what's really going on there. We're going to be revisiting this immigration story in Europe. And we're going to be getting into predictive programming, which we alluded to a little bit in this episode if you were paying attention. But we're going to be diving into it in depth coming up in the next week or two. So stay tuned, subscribe to the channel here on YouTube, and we'll see you soon.